Prior to my 8-month hiatus, I agonized over which franchise to break down after Pirates of the Caribbean. I wanted to get a few trilogies under my belt, and since I only do franchises once every third video, I hesitated about stepping into the larger ones like James Bond or the MCU. My newfound motto since my return, however, is simply f*** it. Let's jump right into the thick of it and see how long it takes me to catch up with Marvel's newest release. And naturally, we'll start in the very beginning with Jon Favreau's 2008 blockbuster, Iron Man. The timestamps for each sequence can be found in the comments section if you'd like to watch along. Now, let's begin. We start, as always, with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. We meet Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark, his position as the modern and arguably amoral god of war, and the rippling consequences of his prodigious influence in the war machine. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Rhodey serves as a barometer for the military sentiment, friendly yet frustrating, and Obadiah Stane serves as the Stark proxy in all things public and professional, while Tony lives his best life, as responsibility-free as possible, leaving Pepper Potts to serve as the administrator of his private life. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. Tony arrives for the flight to his fateful kidnapping from the opening, which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and also what remains the same. Tony lives his best life with his military barometer, and hosts the demonstration of his latest and greatest weapon, then wakes up from the attack as a prisoner. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Tony is being kept alive with crude technology. His captors demand the assembly of the latest Stark weapon, and demonstrate they are preferred customers of the God of War. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always smaller in scope than what the third acts will demand. Tony agonizes over his weapons in enemy hands, with his cellmate in his ear, who both set to work building a new power source, escape and destruction on Tony's mind. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. The special or otherwise innocent people in Tony's circle, his superhuman engineering prowess, the ever-present threat from those who seek power, and Tony's capacity to save people from horrible fates. Which brings us to the brief event that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Tony sets to work by way of montage to assemble the prototype Iron Man suit. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they learn the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Tony and Yinsen quickly assemble the piecemeal suit before their captors catch them, but Tony's plan can't work without his circle giving their all. Then he takes his first few steps and first few victims in the bulky prototype. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat, rather than internal or emotional. Yinsen's final words give Tony his new righteous mission, who proceeds to burn all the ill-gotten Stark weapons, then escapes his captors into the arms of Rhodey. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Despite his trauma and need for medical care, he blazes on a new path that runs against everyone around him, then shuts down his weapons manufacturing division, causing wider chaos for his circle. Then we endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Obadiah tries to manipulate Tony back into a cooperative frame of mind, but tips his hand that someone in Tony's circle isn't trustworthy. While his company's stock price plummets and the upgrade to his second-gen power source requires a second set of hands, forcing Tony to acknowledge the trustworthy people in his life. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story which they've gathered and learned so far. The military barometer refuses to help Tony if the goal isn't weapons engineering, while his captors comb the desert to recreate the newest Stark weapon, and Tony builds on his original schematics in his high-tech man cave. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements from the first act are used to gauge their progress. Tony's Act 1 obsessive preoccupation with work returns, despite his good intentions, and his board of directors makes a move to lock him out of his own company. Obadiah's Act 1 politicking makes a play for the third-gen power source. Then Tony experiments with the first working parts of the prototype's upgrade, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Now more than theoretical, Tony Stark achieves the victory he needs to make the Iron Man suits a reality. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. Tony's fully assembled suit works and flies and keeps him from killing himself with stupid stunts, and Pepper's gift of sentimentality validates his new frame of mind, change of heart, and direction of character. Next, our characters complete their smaller scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow yet altogether meaningless without also completing a larger scope objective. Tony arrives unexpectedly at a gala to reinsert himself in the operations of the company, but threatens to destabilize his image. He makes an attempt to draw his inner circle closer, but opens a romantic can of worms that he'll only complicate worse. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self, their worldly identity, or their physical journey. The photos of new Stark weapons in enemy hands lift the wool from his eyes. Obadiah confesses to his double-cross, which is too late to stop. Then violence overseas calls out for a hero. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Tony suits up in the iconic red armor for the first time, and easily mops the floor with the blood of the 10 rings. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss. This is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Tony's explosive activities catch the attention of the military, who adopt a shoot now and ask questions later mentality in the presence of superior technology, which is further complicated when Iron Man is responsible for the destruction of a fighter jet. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. Rhodey tends to the government cover-up of Tony's involvement overseas, while Pepper immediately discovers the secret identity of Iron Man. Obadiah reveals himself as the direct contact to the 10 rings, and steals the prototype suit for his own nefarious agenda, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. Obadiah Stane sets the manufacturing team into motion to create Ironmonger. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the larger scope objective. Tony states with all sincerity that he cannot return to the god of war he once was, and dedicates himself to the Iron Man missions. Then Pepper dedicates herself as the assistant to a superhero, despite her fear of it leading to him getting killed. Then stares down Obadiah as she hacks into restricted files. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. Agent Coulson's dogged determination places him in the perfect position to escort Pepper to safety. The godlike breadth of Tony's superhuman engineering abilities is placed on full display. Obadiah deepens his treachery by extracting the third-gen power source from Tony's chest cavity, and Tony's pet-like robotic assistant saves the day. Then the final confrontation of our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force plays out. Obadiah juices up the Ironmonger suit. Pepper escorts Agent Coulson to the factory, and Rhodey keeps the military from intervening, while Iron Man and Ironmonger duke it out and cause mass collateral damage, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Tony recalls his earlier reckless mistake and uses it against his calculating nemesis. His evolution has come full circle. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Obadiah somehow survives, which kinda gives credence to that fridge thing in Indiana Jones, to be honest. But the villain always returns for one last scare, right? And Tony survives the encounter by a flicker of his depleted power source. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. Agent Coulson wraps up the government cover-up with a tidy bow, and Pepper reaffirms her awkward working relationship to Tony Stark. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Rhodey shows us that the military is in lockstep with the cover-up, but then Tony confesses his superhero identity anyway. And there you have it. Robert Downey Jr. kicks off the ambitious superhero franchise with a villain-turned-good installment, which adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way. Now, let's move on from a man in search of his soul to a man in search for his beloved truffle pig. Nicolas Cage surprised everyone with his dramatic portrayal of a man on a mission. Join me next time for Michael Sarnowski's 2021 release, Pig. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.